It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical, Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague, a man who doesn't look a day older than when we first did this on the 20th of October, 2012. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
If anything, I look younger, as I'm a lot lighter than I was then.
You're half the man. More like 6 feet. I don't know. Not half. You haven't lost half of your body weight.
I would be surprised if I had.
That would be awesome. That would make you Christian Bale in The Machinist. And luckily you are not that. You are a sprightly young man of 40 plus years of age. As he just drops all his shit all over the floor.
So I was on my iPad.
And he's been doing that for 10 years too. It's week 7 of the NFL season coming up straight away. We're going to have the main events. We're going to talk coaches. We're going to talk parity. We're then going to get into fancy rankings. We're going to talk fancy darlings, fancy losers, and fantasy predictions. Bold, some would say, some others wouldn't. Bound to go wrong. And then we're going to talk about the fact that we've been doing this for 10 years, which is, first of all, insane. Ironic, because, I think we probably got 4 people listening. It may be a different 4 than the first show we did, but, one of those things, and we'll talk about that to end the show. And then I've got a little clip to finish us off. But, Neil, let us start the show, as we mean to go on with the main event.
Time now for the main event.
Coaching matters, don't know if you knew. And we've had some good coaching performances so far and some bad ones. I wanted to highlight 3 of each. Or talk 3 good ones and then kind of talk hot seat to kind of value in terms of who we think is going to go. I'm going to start, and the person I want to highlight is Brian Daboll. I think me and you were quite clear that we believe the New York Giants were one of the worst teams in the NFL and fully expected them to be a top 5 pick this year. They are right now 5-1 and have a real chance travelling to Jacksonville to go 6-1. One thing really has changed between last season and this season, and that's the head coach. And Brian Daboll needs to be commended for such a fantastic performance that he's put in for his team so far this year.
Yeah, Brian Daboll, it seems to be this incredible breed of coaches who comes in, looks at what they've got and decides, okay, this is what I've got, this is what I can do, as opposed to coming in with, well, this is my system. Yeah, but we can't run it. This is my system. Okay, dickhead, but we still can't run it. So he's come in, and no one would say this offense is explosive. It's not an offense you want a ton of in fantasy. It's not a quarterback I think they still are not 100% sold on long term, because they're not asking him to win games. They're just asking him to, and it's this term that over the last 10 years has taken on a pejorative meaning. He's a game manager. They're asking him to manage the game in a way he's not been able to do before because of his ball security issues and his Daniel please moments, which he seems to have cut down on. So the offense is functional. It's boring. It's a Saab. It's not going to win any Car of the Year awards. They're not going to put out any fancy adverts, and even if they did, they probably wouldn't have any pictures of the car in it because it's that dull.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to be beating themselves, whereas Giants teams over the last 10 years, certainly, have done that on a consistent basis. Now, good coaching helps on the margins. Players still need to make plays. At the moment, I say these players are responding to coaching, and I think, are greater than the sum of their parts. I still waiting for the wobble, when they play a quote unquote good team and get their doors blown off. But you can't deny that having grown-ups in charge has helped this team a lot quicker than I think a lot of us realised. Whether that's linked to the general 8-8/8-9 nature of this season, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, after 6 games, they've won 5 of them. And they've not been 5-1 since 2009. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. Talent is not at a premium at the Giants, but I think coaching has been excellent. You don't beat yourself, and I think coaching allows that situation to happen. I think, if we look at kind of the history of Brian Daboll, Nick Saban, Sean McDermott in his life has helped him. I really do believe that. They are strong leaders and men who kind of deal in details, and both defensive minded in terms of organisation, in terms of structure. Now, Brian Daboll is not, but he has allowed himself to be driven that way, to allow himself a logic that it's, defence is important. And I sometimes think offensive coaches forget that. You say you were expecting them to get their doors blown off. I understand that. But I'm going to give you a list now. Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Davis Mills, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, the Washington Commies twice, Jalen Hurts twice, Kirk Cousins and Matty Ice. They are the quarterbacks that the New York Football Giants have left. Not exactly a murderer's row. We discussed this, or I discussed it mostly in highlighting what I believe that the Eagles would do at the start of the season. That is, the schedule for the NFC East is not difficult, and therefore I expect them to win more games than they should, but I didn't expect them to be 5-1. And I think we're going to get 3 NFC East teams in the playoffs, which at the start of the season I would have thought you were insane.
Mm-hmm.
On the touchdown review, I speak weekly to Thomas Willoughby, who's the biggest Falcon fan I know, and also a glass half full kind of guy. But even he has been shocked by the performance and the standard of the Atlanta Falcons. If we didn't think that the New York Giants were going to be the worst team in the league, I think we would have thought the Atlanta Falcons were close, especially if I said to you that Drake London and Kyle Pitts have been non-factors in the offense. What we do know is, we know 2 things about Arthur Smith. He's a billionaire and related to one, and we continually underestimate the ability he has to make offense work in both his performance at Tennessee with the Titans and now his performance with the Atlanta Falcons, regardless of how ugly it's looked both times.
Yeah, it's a throwback football. Their neutral pass rate on Sunday was 35%. Now, I know that they were ahead for most of the game and did end up winning it by 2 scores, but this is a franchise that in its last 2 drafts spent first-round picks on a unicorn pass-catching tight end and a wide receiver. And they don't want to throw the ball. They don't want to play quickly. Their defense is a hodgepodge of various players of various skill levels. And, even their running backs, when they've got them, aren't... this isn't Barry Sanders and Billy Sims coming, through the room. They just, again, they seem to be well coached. They have a quarterback who, again, is not killing them. Not at the moment, anyway. It's bloody boring, but they are competitive in a very weak division and have a genuine chance at winning it because of the dysfunction in the other 3 teams. It's not a joy to watch. I'm sure Rich Wyatt and other people, like Mr. Willoughby would agree.
Yeah.
But again, ultimately, would you rather be winning and bored or losing and entertained?
Yeah, I think as well is, again, much in the Brian Daboll situation, Arthur Smith has looked at what he has and what he can utilise based on his quarterback and has built a system around that. Now, obviously, when you draft Pitts in London so high, you would expect to be able to use that, but he doesn't believe he's got a quarterback who can meet that requirement. So right now he's doing what he needs to do to win games, and that's his job. And I know we laugh and joke, and we did, and we think it's ridiculous that he doesn't use Kyle Pitts, and he's like, I don't care about your fantasy team, but he doesn't. And he's, at the moment, his team is 3-3, and in a tie for the division lead with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who you could argue are completely and utterly broken as their quarterback right now, however much he's the greatest of all time, would prefer to go to Robert Kraft's wedding reception than practice and travel with his teammates.
The Falcons are undefeated against the spread this season,
which is like mind-boggling. We don't do gambling anymore, and there's reasons for that. But that is a staggering turn of events. I want to go back to New York. A man said he was keeping receipts and he was going to call them out. That man must be handing back receipts like a millionaire hands out money. Oh no, they don't do that. That doesn't make sense. But Robert Saleh is finally getting the Jets in winning ways, and he can only be commended for that.
Robert Saleh basically got his reputation when the 49ers had a beastly defense that allowed them to get the ball back for the opposition to do Kyle Shanahan style things. First few years, is this his second year? Second. Yeah, okay. They didn't have the defense to meet his end of the bargain, but now they have. They have defensive playmakers. Quinnen Williams is a grown-ass man who literally was living in the Green Bay backfield last week. Sauce Gardner is the best Jets cornerback since young Darrell. And they are allowing themselves to get in positions where Zach Wilson can't hurt them. Now, it's annoying because this is an offense that the Green Bay Packers, I think, would kill for in terms of the offensive skill talent. You know, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Braxton Berrios, two good tight ends, Breece Hall and Michael Carter. But there's so many mouths to feed, and they don't want to feed any of them because they don't have to. But again, it comes down to coaching. The defense is living up to the reputation of the head coach. How many defensive head coaches do you see eventually get fired because their bailiwick can't do anything?
Correct.
So it's reassuring. It's not reassuring. It's gladdening to see that it seems to be working for the Jets. And again, it's the AFC East is now suddenly competitive. Don't know how long it'll last. But again, this is not it's the Bills division and no one else needs to worry or care. They're all in it. So again, you have to say the coaching does help.
Right now, they have the best LaFleur on a coaching staff in the NFL. The defense is excellent. It should be noted that, as people who've listened to this show long enough know, I love a man who backs himself and has that hint of arrogance in his life. Therefore, number one with a bullet in my heart, and my favourite player in the NFL right now is Sauce Gardner. Any man who dominates wide receivers like that as a defensive back and then runs off the field wearing a cheese head in Lambeau Field in a kind of F you, we won this game, is a man in my book that needs to be celebrated and adored, and he will be. Neil, let's go negative. Let's look at the hot seat. The top three hot seat picks right now, according to certain sites, are Ron Rivera, Nathaniel Hackett, and Cliff Kingsbury. Different stages of careers, different stages of situations for those teams and franchises, but absolutely three guys who need to keep a look over their shoulder, as their job security should not be high. I believe that Cliff plays on Thursday. If they lose to the Saints with the possibility of Taysom Hill being the quarterback, Cliff shouldn't be allowed back on the plane.
Cliff Kingsbury, after he leaves the Cardinals, whenever it happens, will never coach in the NFL again. He has the Lane Kiffin stink about him, in that he probably shouldn't have got the job in the first place, then showed that he wasn't up to it, then went away and dominated college football again. Might get talked about occasionally when teams think outside the box, but will never come back. The offense is broken. They run more plays than any other team. Literally, in terms of pace of play, they are number one. That's average plays per minute. But they're 14th in yards and 21st in points. So you can run as many plays as you want. If it ends with you giving the opposition the ball back, what does it matter? The one good piece of the offense that seemed to be delivering was Marquise Brown. He's hurt, so they then go and trade for a malcontent. and give up actual draft capital to get him. Not major, but they gave up draft capital for a player who was going to get cut because he verbally disagreed with his position coach and then got sent to the locker room by his head coach. It's broken. Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins is coming back. Is he coming back in 2017? I don't think so. Defense is a mess. Offense is a mess. It's poorly coached. They're not maximising the talent that they have. They're not a massively talented roster, I know. But Cliff has not been helped by the general manager, and he's not been helped by the quarterback. You know, you get paid, mate. You get paid an awful lot of money. You have to be better, and you're not. Nathaniel Hackett, as I always dubious about offensive coordinators who don't call plays. Always, especially when they're also linked to Hall of Fame quarterbacks. You could argue Aaron Rodgers has been shit this year. Nathaniel Hackett isn't there. It's a stretch. He's not been helped again by a quarterback who's being paid the big bucks and isn't up to it. The Broncos are average. They're allowing 16.5 points per game, but they're scoring 15. 2022. Ron Rivera was brought in as a man to build culture. You can't build culture in that place. It's a shit tip. It is, hope has forsaken it. It is, it's it's the plains of Rohan, with orcs parading brazenly in open country. It's compost, and even compost does occasionally grow nice flowers. This can't. It's toxic waste. Rivera is also getting very prickly whenever anyone mentions the quarterback that he blatantly didn't want and had foisted upon him. And it's not a good look, Ron. You came out and said, why are you so far behind the rest of the NFC East? You said quarterback, but apparently Wentz was the player you wanted, even though this report said that he was a Schneider pick. It's one or the other, mate. And ultimately, it comes down to you.
If you're Ron Rivera, you don't need this in your life, right? You just don't. You're probably going to get fired at the end of the year. The question right now, based on Jim Irsay, is who goes first, Ron Rivera or Daniel Snyder? The world should be praying that it's Daniel Snyder. Regardless, I think Ron goes, and that's, I'm not sure how you fix the Washington Commanders. It's not a single man job. It only starts when Daniel Snyder leaves. Nathaniel Hackett had one job. Nathaniel Hackett's job was to get Aaron Rodgers to be the Denver Broncos quarterback. Nathaniel Hackett didn't get Aaron Rodgers. He got Russell Wilson. They're not the same. Trevor Siemian started 24 games for the Denver Broncos and averaged points per game as the quarterback, 18.5 points. Joe Flacco, 15.6. Drew Lock, 19.8. Brian Greasy, 22.7.
And they hated him.
Russell Wilson right now is averaging 14.8 points. By the way, to add even more context to that, Tim Tebow averaged 17.9 in the 14 games. I don't care if his hamstring is falling off, if his arm is falling off. You decided to pay this man $250 million. You decided to put your franchise in the hands of Nathaniel Hackett, and it has failed miserably. The opposite of hiring a defensive coach whose then defense is garbage. The worst of that is hiring an offensive coordinator, quote unquote, whose offense stinks, and Nathaniel Hackett stinks. The Cliff Kingsbury thing, never understood it. He was a failed college coach who was about to become the offensive coordinator of USC and got an NFL job. I have no idea why, and I still don't to this day. Him and Steve Keim got contract extensions, and as did Kyler. Two of them have to be gone as soon as possible, and I don't think it's Kyler Murray. So they need to sort that out quick, smart. Neil, parity is a word bandied around in the NFL a lot. And right now, the middle is the middle, and there's lots of it in the NFL. And then in any given Sunday situation, any team can beat any team, as proven by games such as last week, the Packers getting beat by the Jets and the Giants beating the Ravens. Do you prefer it when the league is like this? Or do you prefer a situation, if we go back years, where Patriots and Colts are dominating the league and you have dynasties, in which obviously the Patriots was the dynasty, like the Colts were the little brother who got beat a lot?
I don't mind if everyone is playing at a similar level and we have situations like this where there are divisions where so many teams are within one game of the lead. I object when the quality of all these teams is so bad that you're left screaming out for dynasties. Because dynasties are boring. Let's be honest. I'm not a New York Jets fan. I'm not a Miami Dolphins fan. I'm not a Buffalo Bills fan. I'm not a fan of any other AFC team. What the New England Patriots have done for the last 20 years, aside from 2 particular Sundays in February, has not affected me in any stretch of any way. But I'm bored of them. I want something else. I want another team. It's the same with anything. It was Liverpool in the 80s. It was United in the 90s and the 2000s. It was, the Yankees, I suppose, in their heyday. We get bored of it. We want to see other teams. We want to see our own team, but ideally we want to see new teams doing it. But at least when you saw the Patriots, I know I hate them, but at least it's good football I'm watching. Currently, there are 4 or 5 teams maybe, but you're watching thinking, Everton looks good, Everton's clicking. Even when they make mistakes, it's at least they were trying to make a play. There is so much dog shit football getting played at the moment, and most of it starts at the quarterback position. We've gone from a situation where we had 4 or 5 years ago 15 or 16 viable starting quarterbacks. Now, if we've got more than 10, I'd be stunned.
I think it's interesting, right? I'm with you. If the football's good, I don't care if there's one team who dominates or there's 10 great teams. As long as the football is good, right? What I don't need is a load of hodgepodge of mediocrity living in the world. I do like a situation where you can have a Pats Colts multiple games. I look at that Bills Chiefs situation, and based on the way the leagues are done and the fact that those teams will probably win their divisions regularly over the next 5, 6, 7 years, that they will play each other a lot. I think that's good, right? What I don't need is a lot of average, a lot of not good. The league is better when there's more good quarterbacks. We thought we had more this year, but we haven't. And quarterbacks who we thought would be good haven't been good. AFC West, we crowned it. That was a mistake. Hold your hands up. We were wrong on that. You know what I mean? We were just wrong. Those teams are nowhere near as good as we thought they were. You're allowed to make that opinion and then say, actually, I was wrong. Do you know what I mean? We didn't think the AFC East or the NFC East were going to be good. I thought the I thought the Eagles would win a load of games. I thought the Bills would win a load of games, but I didn't think the divisions would be very good. Right now they are. Okay, hands up. But there's not enough of that. There's a lot more NFC Souths, which is just abysmal. Saints are awful. Bucks are awful. Falcons are frisky. Panthers should be sent to the moon. Do you know what I mean? No one needs to see that. Now, in the NFL, what allows you to forget this regularly is between 8:30 and 9:30 UK time on a Sunday. It doesn't matter what teams are what. There's 6 or 7 games that are one score that are going to go down to the final play. That's what the NFL wants. What we want is for that to be good football, not bad football. And at the moment, a lot of that 8:30 till 9:30, although exciting, although compelling, is not legit, is not excellent football.
Yeah, we're living for the witching hour. Dave Damashek always says as well that some call it parity. It's actually mediocrity.
Correct.
if everyone's special, no one's special, and if no one's special, no one's special.
Correct. Let's get on to the fancy portion of the show, and let's start with Fancy Darling.
Hello, darling.
Neil, 0-2 last week, back-to-back 0-2 weeks, 4-8 overall. You picked Hayden Hurst to be a big tight end threat. He was tight end 25 in PPR, 5.1 points. For the second consecutive week, you picked the defense. This week you picked the Jags. And for the second consecutive week, they scored minus points and were the worst in the league. They had -1, and they were the worst defense in all of fantasy.
Do you know, the Colts' neutral pass rate last week was 80%.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. He threw it. Matt Ryan, who's 74, threw it 70 million times. It doesn't make any sense. But they won so, and are now somehow a team with a winning record, which, if that doesn't sum up the previous conversation on mediocrity, I don't know what does. Give me your fancy darlings. Give me your first one, please.
Well, in a sick joke, Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen are both on the bye this week. So 2 of the 4 quarterbacks you can actually set your watch to this season. So there may be a lot of teams out there that are doing quite well who are going to be in need of a quarterback. They're not going to give them away, so you're going to have to go to the they're going to have to go to the waiver wire. So maybe you go with Jimmy Garoppolo this week. The Kansas City Chiefs have allowed the 49ers are playing the Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch. Always like them. The Chiefs are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. They've only intercepted 1 pass. And Jimmy Garoppolo's not been terrible. He's been Jimmy Garoppolo. He scored at least 16 fantasy points in 3 of the 5 games he's played this season, including both of the last 2. Ideally, you'd like the 49ers to have to pass the ball a bit more than they like. But we saw last week when they were down 2 scores against the Falcons, they still went really slowly. But still, Garoppolo should be able to put up semi-decent numbers to try and tide you over until Josh and Jalen come back.
What I love about that is it's a great pick, but also, all them people who told me that, Jimmy G was the answer and he'd win them games and he gets them to title games and whatever. Yeah, I understand that. I know how records work as well, and I can see the reason they tried to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo was last week. There is too many times when Jimmy G plays like that for him to be someone that Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to send far, far away. Who's your second fancy darling, Neil?
Now, ideally, we prefer to have players in good offences if we can get them.
We do.
Especially a tight end. However, if we can't get good, we'll take volume. Robert Tonyan is averaging 16% of the Green Bay Packers targets. This week, they don't have Randall Cobb, who looked like he was in a lot of pain last week and probably out for the season. He's actually going to miss a few weeks. So while it's not a great matchup on paper because the Commanders have allowed the 2nd fewest receptions to tight ends in the entire league, if Tonyan's going to get double-digit targets from a tight end, that's all we want. So he's available in quite a lot of leagues. So I say if you're missing, Dallas Goedert, Dawson Knox, even Irv Smith as the Vikings are on leave as well. Tyler Higbee, well, another one on bye who has been getting targets but not doing much with them. Then I don't think Tonyan's a bad shout this week.
Let's move on to fancy loser. Lost last week. Neil picked Joe Mixon. He was running back 11, 16.8 points. Overall, 3-3, still a 500. Neil, who's your loser this week?
Well, there will be people who would say that with Robbie Anderson now out of the way, that this is great news for DJ Moore because there's no other established pass catchers. If you're in a 10-team league or lower, there is no reason why DJ Moore should still be on your roster. And this pains me because I love DJ Moore. I have him in one of my leagues. It's a 12-team league. I haven't started in the last 3 weeks. Don't know why I'm bothering. So it's not particularly because the matchup is bad, although it's not great. I just think the quarterback play and offensive play calling is so bad that, yeah, He might see all the targets. He also might do bugger all with them. So there's no point.
I drafted him in a startup dynasty league 2 years ago and was ecstatic with said pick. Nothing but pain and disappointment. As you said, been on my bench the last 3 weeks. Know the talent is there. No one can get him the ball. Not really worth it. Disaster.
It's. I was going to say then, it's like the Andre Johnson situation, except Andre Johnson was still ridiculously productive.
Correct.
Even with garbage thrown in the ball.
Correct.
If Moore doesn't get the ball, he can't do anything with it.
Absolutely. Let's get on to fancy predictions bound to go wrong. Last week, Neil, we were 1-1. You picked the big game between Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and you believed they would get a combined 85 fantasy points. They didn't. They were quarterback 3 and 6 in what was a pretty garbage week for fantasy scoring, let's be honest. But they only got 48 combined points. I believed, based on some knowledge, that Ramondre Stevenson would continue his excellent form for the New England Patriots and dominate the Cleveland Browns and be a top 3 running back, gaining over 25 points. He was running back number 2 last week and had 25.1 points. I believe that's the first time I've got this effing thing right. Go me. I'm just taking a victory lap, and that's all we'll say about that. Give me your fancy prediction for this week, please.
In light of how pathetic the passing game is going to be outside of this one particular player, the NFL single game record for touches is 48, and that was held by James Wilder and LaDainian Tomlinson. Christian McCaffrey will equal it this week.
48 touches for CMC, is that right, Neil? Is that
That's
what we're
right.
saying? I've just realised I have not done this yet this week, so I am doing this on the fly. I am going to say that the Sun God bounces back this week after injury and a bye to be a top 3 wide receiver this week against the Dallas Cowboys. And I think there's a chance that the Lions pull the upset this week and beat the Dallas Cowboys with Dak back at quarterback, because that's how the Dallas Cowboys roll, and that would obviously be hilarious. So for me, Sun God, top 3 wide receiver this week, 25 plus points again.
Bold.
We shall see. We shall see. Neil, as you mentioned at the start of the show, that is it for the main part of the show, first of all. As we mentioned at the start of the show, 20th of October 2012, me and you sat in your house, still your house now.
It was actually your mum and dad's house.
Was? Oh yeah, it was, you're correct, in my mum and dad's house, to record a pilot, let's just say, of Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. It was still called that at that moment in time. 10 years later, a bit later, as Neil said, we're still here, and we wanted to kind of talk about that briefly, and kind of give you some of our favourite bits and what we've done. Neil, show 1, 20th of October 2012. Can you remember the 3 main things we discussed that week?
I believe it was Bond,
Yes.
Phil Rivers, and Ray Lewis.
Yes, we discussed RG3 and Phil Rivers and, yes, Ray Lewis. Yeah, that was it. This show was pre-fantasy angle, and we talked our favourite Bonds, our worst Bonds. How many Bonds? Have there been 2 more Bonds since then? I think this was we did this because Quantum of Solace was just come
Skyfall.
out? Was it?
Skyfall. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Skyfall,
since then we've had
10 years old.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
so since then we've had Spectre and
No, that's it. No, Skyfall, there's only been one more then. You sure it
No,
wasn't
it's
Quantum
been
of
two.
Solace?
no, it was Skyfall
Okay.
because there's been
Anyway.
two since.
There hasn't been two since?
There's Spectre and there was the last one they've just done.
Wasn't that called Skyfall?
No,
We used to know Bond well better than this, Lee.
what was it?
This is a nightmare.
No Way to Die or something.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right. You're right, I'm wrong.
I know I'm right.
Neil, what I would like is, can you give me a favourite podcast moment, please?
Well, any time anyone has been gracious enough to waste 10, 15 minutes of their time, or hours in some people's cases, to come on and chat with us has been great. My favourite ones have been where we've got to speak to people who, I'm not going to say I've fanboyed, but certainly I've actually been nervous going into it. Mm-hmm. And one of them was Hall of Famer Dick Vermeil,
Correct.
who we've had the pleasure of speaking to twice. Yeah. Because, pardon the language, it's Dick fucking Vermeil.
Correct.
And the other one was Jonathan Trott, because obviously he's one of my favourite cricketers of all time, and also because in speaking to him and saying it was only an audio show and not a video one, I disappointed him because he especially wore his San Francisco 49ers shirt for it. So I've upset Jonathan Trott, which wounds me more than anyone will know. But as I say, all the other guests, the guests who've been gracious enough to come back time and time again, Charles Dagnall, Liz Loza, the around the NFL boys, Pat, Denny, JJ, these people who've come back and experienced it once and then decided, God, that was a waste of time. May as well do it again. The hat goes off to them.
Absolutely. Dick Vermeil was a highlight. Usually what you will find in the interview stage is, given work commitments and other stuff, Neil does more individual ones than I do. But one of the individual ones that I did without Neil was Scott Hansen. And I was one of the first people to see his house inside, which now he shows a lot of people like kind of how his setup is. But it was great to speak to Scott. I loved speaking to Charles Davis. Thought it was fantastic. And he was really engaged when we spoke about Tennessee. I think sometimes doing that bit of research is always good. Although my favourite thing ever that we ever did was finding out that Liz Loza went out with a guy from Macclesfield. I don't think anything will beat that. And that lady is now the front and centre of ESPN's coverage of fancy football. And we talked about her love life in Northern England.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was just impressive that we found out that she was in 2 episodes of 24. And then she literally says, no, stuff Kiefer Sutherland. Mac is where it's at.
Correct. What I would also say is, in terms of my favourite podcast moments, is Neil. And why I say that is the reason that we started the show is twofold. We like talking, and Neil was trying to make me feel better about my life. And he did. And he continues to do so on a regular basis. It's extreme to say he saved my life. I was never in that place, but I wasn't happy. And I was mentally not in a place where people should be. And Neil to spend time with me weekly at the time, face to face. We've done this regularly now, not face to face probably for 8-9 years, but when we first started doing it, it was in the same room at the same time. For Neil to dedicate that time as a friend to help me through a very difficult situation is my favourite podcast moment. Have we improved, Neil? Do you believe?
I think we know a lot more about what we know a lot more about the subject we speak of. The one thing I think the remote situation, but we're not as chatty as we were when we were in the same room, because you talk over people, because you'll start talking and I'll start talking. There's that occasional lag, so it sounded a little bit more conversational back in the early days. But I think we've got better, because ultimately, while it is two scouse idiots chatting about stuff they like, we, so it sounded a little bit more conversational back in the early days. But I think we've got better, because ultimately, while it is two scouse idiots chatting about stuff they like, we, so it sounded a little bit more conversational back in the early days. But I think we've got better, because ultimately, while it is two scouse idiots chatting about stuff they like, I would like to think that 3 or 4 people who've listened over the years come away thinking, A, they've been entertained, and also maybe they've learned something.
I do that a lot less. I've tried to do that a lot less. It's difficult. It's a Scousism. It's a tick. It's whatever. I think we've always got better at knowing the guests, asking them questions, getting them engaged, right? It's easy to ask them standard stuff about standard things. What we've always tried to do is ask those NFL-related ones, but as you mentioned, speak to Liz about 24, speak to Mark Schofield about Newcastle. Those kind of things we've always engaged in, and they're things that I think we've always tried to excel at, and things that we've always enjoyed. We enjoy talking to new people. I enjoy it much more in podcast than I do in real life. But yeah, it's always good to get those people on, talk to them, and find out some really interesting things that, in theory, if you listen to them talk on their shows or write for their websites, you wouldn't find out about.
One of my favourites was, because one of my favourite devices, you see, you usually open the interviews, you usually start them. So I will, in true West Coast style offense, in true West Coast tribute, I will script the first question. Yeah. And I will script it in a way that sounds like it's going to be really serious and hard hitting, but then it goes into something completely off topic. And my favourite one of that was, I can't remember when exactly it was, but it was Mark Sessler, and it was something about, we're getting to this time of year where, the draft's happened, free agencies come in, training camps around the corner, all these things are happening, but what we really need to know is, why will Kylo Ren fly the Millennium Falcon in the last Star Wars film? And he didn't miss a beat, and he just went straight into an answer. And it was like the way his brain works. It's something. I mean, a lot of people, when we asked those ones, like Mark Schofield, we went through all that, and I said, "So tell me though, Mark, why is Bob Kelso the greatest sitcom character of all time?" And he laughs, and then he gives his answer. Sessler just went straight into his reasoning.
Yeah,
and it was brilliant.
Professionalism in its purest form. Neil, we may not do this for 10 years. We may do it for 5 more. We may not do it. What would you like to do for however long we continue to do the pod?
Well, there are some people that, for various reasons, occasionally that they don't listen to, they don't respond. Sometimes it's just never been possible to get them because, remember, most of the people we speak to live in America, and a lot of them live on the far side of America. So in their night, when they have free time, I'm asleep. So there have been people that I'd like to have got on, but for one reason or other, it didn't happen. So there's still some people that there's pipe dreams. I mean, Mark Hamill is never coming on this podcast.
No.
Rich Eisen is never coming on this podcast.
No.
We can ask.
We can.
And I'll keep trying. But there are still a lot of people who we engage with on Twitter. Maybe they follow us. We read their stuff. There's people I'm going to try and get because I want to talk to them. And because, I don't think their lives are complete until they've had 2 monotonous Scouse tones ask them questions about shit they haven't answered.
Give me Benjamin Solak, give me Kevin Clark, or give me death. I would also like us to get more fantasy predictions right. And maybe, we can do that going forward this season, but we'll find out. Neil, we're going to bore some people now because what we're going to do is give you a monotonous list of people who've been on the show who we would like to thank for being on the show. Once Neil closes that off, we will leave and we will finish with the first 50 seconds of the first show and then we'll close. So these top guys are out. We want to give a big thank you to everyone. Neil, who do we want to give a big thank you to?
Firstly, we want to say that the first 50 seconds of the show was actually the 3rd time we recorded the damn thing, but someone couldn't press play and record at the same time. In alphabetical order, I would like to thank the following people for donating their time once, twice, 3 times a lady, or more in some cases. So those people are Adam Carroll Smith, Adam Cummins, Adam Goldstein, Adam Levitan, Adam Rank, Alex Gelhar, Andrew Brandt, Andy Behrens, Andy Dutton, Barry Cass, Ben Gretsch, Brandon Lee Goughton, Charles Dagnall, Charles Davis, Chris Thomason, Chris Trapasso, the great Chris Wessling, Colleen Wolfe, Dan Hanses, Dave Damashek, Dave Spadero, Dave Tuckman, Denny Carter, Dick Vermeil, Elliot Christ, Eric Galco, Erica Tamposi, Evan Silver, Fran Duffy, Garrett Wong, Greg Cosell, Greg Rosenthal, Henry Hodgson, James Dixon, James Coe, Jared Kimber, Jason Fitzgerald, Jeff Reinbold, Jenny Vrentis, Jim Ryan King, Jim Sarantas, Jimmy Kemsky, JJ Zachariason, John Bashard, John Daigle, John DiFilippo, Jonathan Trott, Josh Norris, Javon Hay, JT O'Sullivan, Justin Hathaway, the late great Kevin Cadle, Kevin Patra, Liam Plunkett, Liz Bandari, Liz Loza, Mark Sessler, Marcus Grant, Mark Bullock, Mark Schofield, Mark Teese, Matt Money Smith, Matt Franciscovich, Matt Harmon, Matt Kelly, Matt Waldman, Mike Carlson, Mike Clay, Nat Coombs, Ollie Connolly, Patrick Clayton, Patrick Crawley, Patrick Doherty, Paul Nixon, Raymond Summerlin, Rob Stanton, Ross Tucker, Rumford Johnny, Scott Hansen, Shiel Kapadia, Sigmund Bloom, Steve Weish, the late great Therese Paler, Thor Nystrom, Wade Phillips, Will Gavin, and Zach Dressler.
Thank you to you all. Hello everyone. This is the first of hopefully many episodes of Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. I'm Mainz, this is Dutts. Say hello, Dutts.
Hello, Dutch.
That's an awful guy. And you know what? I've got comedy sound effects. I want to use them.
I'm just doing what got me to the dance.
Yeah, that's why I picked you and not someone else. Yeah.
Harsh.
So what we're going to do over these many episodes, hopefully, is talk about stuff that we like. It sounds, pretty obvious and to the point, but, why would we want to talk about X Factor and Strictly Come Dancing, although that Ola Jordan, wow. But, let's not talk about that, because although Mum will be pleased that I've mentioned that now, because she'll be one of the 4 people who listen to this.
And Ola Jordan is with us today, of course, but can't say anything.
Because we've tied her up.
Yeah.